All right, hello. My name is Lance Leonard. I am an operations manager in the Strategic Operations Group at the Professional Services Division at Worldwide Technology. And with me is Rob Villarreal.
Hello.
He is a Senior BI Analyst in our BICC, or Business Intelligence Competency Center, which is housed in the IT organization at Worldwide. And we're really here today to tell you a story about how Tableau was the catalyst to a revolution within Worldwide and a drive towards a data-driven culture. And so who and what is Worldwide? Worldwide is a supply chain management company, systems integrator, solution provider, reseller. We're really all of the above. You'll look at our vision statement. Provide revolutionary technology products, services, and supply chain solutions for our customers around the globe. Combine that with our mission statement to create a profitable growth company that is also a great place to work. And our core values, trust, humility, embrace change, which is a key one we'll come back to, passion and a strong work ethic, attitude, teamwork, and honesty and integrity. All of those things combined together really tell the story of who Worldwide is and what we do. And so our focus is to measure both the smart side of the business and those definable metrics that are common with every organization, whether it's revenue and growth and all of those things, to the healthy side of the business and more the cultural aspect. We do measure our core values. Our employee reviews incorporate core values. And so we analyze all of that information, look for areas of improvement. We survey the heck out of our employees and gather that feedback and gather insight on it. And so what I'm trying to say is Worldwide is a data-driven company. We do a lot with data, and we analyze that data. The problem is that Worldwide has historically managed and maintained our business in Microsoft Excel. Sure, we have a lot of cool tools behind it, Oracle ERP systems and things like that, and CRM tools and sales enablement tools, document management, logistics, and warehousing. All of those things house really great data, but create a pretty significant problem. But based on that analysis that Worldwide does, we see that we're pretty successful. 23 years in business, over 2,500 employees currently. Founded in 1990 by Jim Cavanaugh and Dave Stewart as a supply chain management company. That was our pure focus. And we've grown through those years to be a reseller of hardware to services just within the last 7 or 8 years. You can see we're a top 5 partner with many of the major technology partners: Cisco, EMC, NetApp, HP, Citrix, VMware. And so there's that revenue chart there, which I will apologize, marketing put this slide together. That's not a Tableau chart, but this is marketing slide. This isn't my slide. I would have used a Tableau chart there, but that's okay. So that's the smart side of the business. Incredible growth over the last 3 years, $1 billion year over year for the last 3 years. Up until the end of 2012, we hit the $5 billion mark. We're on track to hit 6 again in 2013. So incredible success. That's the smart side. The healthy side, we're ranked number 24 on Fortune's Best Company to Work For. CRN named us number 5 IT company to work for. Back to the smart side, we are the largest Black-owned enterprise in North America. This incredible success being managed in Microsoft Excel. Let me hear a collective groan. So, as we move on, as I mentioned, we have multiple tools that we use within the business, and that creates pretty significant problems. We use Salesforce, Oracle, and SharePoint, 3 of the most common tools used within business today. We use all 3 of them, and if we want to ask questions about our data, then we have to go export that data, pull it into Microsoft Excel, do VLOOKUPs, copy, paste, pivot, do whatever we need to do, and we end up with a whole bunch of different reports. But it's impossible to tell a complete story from the time a customer calls or we do a cold call to a customer and an opportunity becomes an idea in somebody's head to the time we close out that project and complete the activity for the customer. There's no way to tell that complete story until we started asking some different questions about our business. So this aspect of the company is something that professional services was doing specifically, and with my context and being able to control what I could control, I started doing some research. How much time is this taking? What type of investment are we making just in compiling data and reporting? We have weekly reports that we do, and at the time, this was the beginning of 2012, those weekly reports took about 30 hours a week, every single week, 30 hours, multiple people putting together multiple reports to then publish out to the rest of the business. We would upload an Excel file to Salesforce. Someone would go take that Excel file, manipulate it within their own context, and end up with some other number than what we had published in the original report. 60 hours a month on monthly reports. Our financial periods at the end of the month, once we closed the books, we would do financial reports, and people would do the exact same thing there. Quarterly, sure, it's only 4 hours a quarter, but they're quarterly reports. That matters. We have to measure that. And what that resulted in was over 2,000 hours of work just in compiling reports manually. That has nothing to do with just the day-to-day management of the business and the data entry side, or the analysis and driving the impact as a result of that reporting. This is just to manually compile and manually publish reports based on all of that data.
This is happening in the business. This is not the time spent in IT to develop any data sources as well. This is what the business is doing to build their own reports.
Right. So that conversation was actually a common one, so thanks for mentioning that, Rob. It's one of those things that typically if we had a question to ask and there wasn't a report that existed in one of these categories, we would go to IT and say, IT, we need to answer this question. They would schedule a meeting. We would talk through requirements. We would document all those requirements. We would mock up a report. We would do some iterations on that. Then we would go through the dev environment and the test environment, QA, and publish that thing out to production, and we'd use it for a little while. And then sometime along the way, somebody else would come along and say, that report doesn't really tell me everything I need to know. I need to know this within my own context, and we'd go back to IT. IT would schedule a meeting. We would gather requirements, dev, test, QA, publish to production, and now we have two reports that tell exactly the same thing, but in different context. So IT being that central warehousing approach for BI and data started gumming up the works, right? So no offense to IT, since Rob's sitting here with me, that's why we're here together, because that's really what changed the culture of the organization.
And this is before my time anyway, so I'm not offended at all.
Right. Thanks for CYA on that one. So moving on, back to these three independent tools, we went to IT and said, IT, this isn't working. I have a background in information technology and software development and business intelligence, so I proposed pretty common sense solution of a data warehouse. And then once we have the data warehouse in place, can we put one single reporting engine on top of this that we all have access to and can all hit consistent information and tell a comprehensive story? Seems like common sense, right? Well, the response I got from IT was a bit of a stiff arm, bit of a turf war there, that IT said, this is IT's responsibility. We've got it covered. We already have a team focused on the data warehouse. We already have a team focused on reporting, and that's who you've been working with. And so we had that conversation of why it's not working, and so we gave them another chance, and they said, we're working on it. Let's do it. Let's work together. And it just was taking too long. We had to manage our business. We were scaling very quickly, as we saw in that original slide. There was no way we could keep up with the demands of the business with this relationship with IT being what it was, because this was the report that we're all used to. Within professional services, this is our project tracking report, and every time we asked for something, it was another column onto the project tracking report. This is obviously a zoomed out view of an Excel report, but it tells us every single thing we need to know about projects in professional services. It tells us who's assigned to them. It tells us the original budget. It tells us how much actual revenue we've done on those projects and what's the ETC revenue that's still scheduled for the future. We can carve this up between open projects and closed projects. Services scopes by technology. all of those things are viewable in this report, and this is our central location for data. I'm just going to let that simmer for a moment, because managing our business through this report took such a significant amount of training and understanding that there was more time and more investment in the training of this report than the actual usage of this report. But really, that's not all that's manual, because obviously we're a business and we have presentations to customers and partners and even internally. And this slide right here is telling you the coverage of our PM and engineering staff within professional services. Each of those icons is supposed to tell us how many employees we have in each state. And so I challenge you to tell me how many employees we have in California or Missouri. Let's make it a little more difficult. New York, Pennsylvania. Completely impossible to use and consume this data. More impossible was just compiling this information, because HR considers location information. I should note that most of our workforce is remote, and so we needed home addresses for people. That HR considers sensitive information, so they wouldn't tell us. We didn't have access to that information. So I would literally email every single one of the employees in our organization, ask them for their home address. They would give it to me, and I would add it to a manual spreadsheet, and then have to copy and paste and do some VLOOKUPs against what I did have from HR based on job roles and things like that, and pivot that in Excel to give me a report that I would then look at and say, we have 39 engineers in Missouri. Click on that pin, change the number to 39. Now, how many project managers do we have in Missouri? Click on the pin, rinse and repeat, right? Pretty common story. So I knew there had to be a better way. That was so painful. 2 days of work just to create a slide, right? So started doing some research, looking at a tool that maybe I could upload a CSV to, or an XML file even. Google Maps APIs. What could I do to recreate this map and automate it? Then I found this cool little tool called Tableau. Within minutes, I had something that looked like that. Trial version of Tableau, connected to that Excel file that admittedly was manually compiled. I was able to create this, which is not only saving me 2 days worth of work to create the map, is much easier to consume. So huge win there right off the bat, just in the map. So this is truly what we call the map that changed the world, and is really the spark that ignited this flame, and where our story really begins. So this is a dashboard we created for the purpose of this presentation, so we can walk you through the story of how Tableau started with that first Tableau license as a result of that map, that I was able to convince professional services to invest in this one license to Tableau, because we weren't getting what we needed from IT, and IT gave us a little bit of the stiff arm. We've already invested in these tools. Tableau isn't going to fit into that stack. We have other business intelligence tools that we can use. They even have self-service components to them. So that first Tableau license begins our story. So these lines on this chart, the green line really is the Tableau rollout. How is our infrastructure being built? And obviously, upward growth. The orange line is more about the impact to the business. How are we truly impacting the business, improving the business? We have a few setbacks that we'll talk about later on in the story. So are we truly impacting the business and providing value with this concept that we're developing here? The blue line is more the culture and the HR side of the structure of the organization with our Business Intelligence Competency Center and how we're rolling out and really the people side of the business. Oh, the charts on the left are a little more detail. Data coverage, how are we doing on that data model? The red color tells us just the manual effort that we put in. The orange is more the short-term solution. IT will give us a view in the database and just a straight-up columnar table view of some data. Moving into kind of a hybrid data warehouse solution in the yellow, all the way to the end of the year, we hope to have a complete, full data warehouse solution in place that now the entire company would have access to. The goals. Worldwide sets goals like any company does at the beginning of the year. We want to make sure that we are able to impact those goals through the data and analysis that we're doing. So we're trying to measure that. We're measuring the number of users that are being impacted here. So the number of users that are using Tableau, both from a desktop perspective and a server perspective, and what type of reports are we publishing? Are we getting more data in the hands of the people through Tableau, through the number of reports that we're publishing? So the thing to notice here is that we have upward growth in every category. And I think the real reason for that is that we're intentional. We're focused about this effort, and that's really the story that we want to tell. So I'll go back to about June of 2012, and that milestone there of executive presentation and the dedicated team in PS. In June, our executives asked the leaders in professional services to give a presentation on the first half of the year's performance. So we were prepping for a July meeting. We had about an hour reserved of the executives' time, and we worked with Tableau to tell a story and created a handful of dashboards. And we went and sat with our CEO and our president and our CFO to tell this story of how professional services had performed in the first half of 2012. And we did create a Tableau dashboard for this, but there's a lot of proprietary information in there. And so we took some screenshots, and a lot of this information is masked. But this is the dashboard that we used with those executives. And you can see at a glance at the top, overall, professional services. This is actually showing the complete year to date of 2012, so end of year 2012. What did we budget from a profit perspective for professional services to how we performed? We nearly tripled our budget. Okay, so then we look at individual organizations on the left. Are we winning or losing? The red and the green are telling us this. The overall growth as the year went on, how did we grow as an organization? Pretty steady growth from January to December at the year end. So pretty significant dashboard here to tell that story. But then we go to step 2. We interact with sales. Sales has agreed, the sales organization has agreed to pay for a portion of professional services resources. And so this is telling them whether that was a good investment or not. Is it benefiting you to reserve professional services employees for your specific region? You can see that in some cases it was a really good investment, some cases it was a poor investment. Then we looked at all the open projects. Where are we today? How are we performing? What's the projection look for the rest of the year? And this is telling us, the green tells us actuals, and the blue tells us ETCs, and some performance metrics there overall for the entire professional services. And we have filters on the right to carve that up by technology and carve it up by organizations. And then we can look at all the closed projects. How did we perform? And pick out the top high margin projects and the top low margin projects, maybe where we lost some money. We spent a lot of time on that scatter plot at the top of checking those outliers and zooming in and kind of looking at where the concentration was of those. But what really happened in that meeting, that we had an hour of the executive's time, was we got to this slide in about 15 minutes and spent a bit of time here, and then the president of the company threw up the timeout signal and said, "This is really cool information, guys. First, I want to know where it's coming from." So to his credit, he was used to looking at Excel spreadsheets, and we were showing him something completely different. He wanted to make sure that these numbers were legitimate, and they tied out to what he was used to seeing that was coming from our finance and our IT departments. We reinforced that. And then we spent the rest of the time, about 45 minutes, on the tool. He was so impressed with what we were able to do through visualizations and how we were able to tell this story using this tool that he became our biggest fan. And ironically, that afternoon, we had another meeting that he was participating in between professional services and IT to talk about many of the IT projects that were being conducted on behalf of PS. And so we were there to talk about some of the other project management applications we were doing, some of the risk management solutions we were putting in place, a lot of business process stuff. But the first thing out of his mouth before we ever got started was, he says to IT, "Hey, IT, do you guys seen this Tableau tool?" They said, "Yes, we have." did you see what great things it can do? And that began a bit of an awkward conversation with IT, because basically what he was saying was, IT, why didn't you do your job? And why did PS have to do this on their own? We need this. And so that truly fanned the flame for Tableau and got us started. And about the same time that I was working that part of the conversation and we were getting that executive sponsorship and that executive kudos there, I started building my empire. Started building my team. Sorry. And it all began with one hire in about May of 2012, Kristen Rolfing, as a data analyst. And her first goal was to take all of those distributed reports, those 60 reports that many people throughout the organization were doing manually, consolidate those under one umbrella, and look for streamlined approaches. Kristen has a background in IT as well. And so it was very easy for her to start spotting some areas of improvement within that process. We also tasked her with working with IT and building out our data model. What are all the data points that PS cares about and wants to measure, and make sure that we have coverage of those things. So soon after, we had already met capacity there, and we added Chris Dressy to the team as another data analyst to take on more reporting and more of that manual effort and work with new requests coming into the organization. And we hit a critical mass at some point where we felt really good about the data that we had access to. We were meeting the demands of the business. We were turning around these reports, recreating a bunch of the existing Excel stuff in Tableau and publishing it through exported packaged workbooks into the business. And so had a good handle on the data and reporting side. And so we started focusing on the next area of value, which has been huge for us as well over the last year and a half, and that's around focused analytics. And so Dawn and her team, Christopher and Vicky, and Robin as well. Robin is a former CPA, former auditor for Worldwide, actually. So she brings that financial background to make sure that we're analyzing the business from a financial perspective, looking for areas of improvement there. But the focus of that side of the team is to step back and look at the 10,000-foot view of the business. Project managers, program managers, resource managers on the delivery and the engineering side, they manage their own world. But it's the forest for the trees conversation, right? They never get the opportunity to take those lessons that they're learning on their individual projects and take a step back and breathe and look at the overall organization. Management really doesn't even have that time. So we built this team to do that for us. 10,000-foot view, analyze the overall business, look for trends. What can the East Coast learn from the West Coast? We have an office in Alaska that's very isolated from the rest of the continental U.S. We have an office in Hawaii that's very isolated. So we work with those teams to look for consistent trends across the business. And what can we learn from that? And we take that feedback and we provide it back into the rest of the business. So now we have a team and we're hitting on all cylinders and we've got the structure in place. And so we built a little mini business plan as a team. And so our vision statement for our business analytics team within professional services is to organize, analyze, interpret data, and provide insight to enable effective business decisions. Key word there is enable. We don't make the decisions. We enable those decisions by doing our analysis and providing that feedback back to the business so they can manage their own business and improve as they see fit. We set some goals for our team that we wanted to meet by the end of 2013. We're already seeing progress. We're well on our way, a few months left in the year, to providing access to all relevant data within the organization. Kristen's data model that she put together for all those PS data points. We've worked with IT, and IT has given us access to all of that information, and now we need that in the data warehouse solution so that it's formatted well and tied to all the other metrics. We want to decrease the report turnaround. No more manual effort. We want to be able to turn these reports around quicker. And we also want to develop that feedback loop from our analysis team and provide that insight and those recommendations back to the business. And most importantly, we want to create more demand. We want to make our jobs harder because the business is demanding more of us. That's really the key part of this data-driven culture, is creating more demand in the business. We're measuring that simply through the number of requests we get. And we do that through a variety of strategies as well, and these are intentional strategies, developing a deeper understanding of the data. Our goal really for 2014 is likely going to be the next step of more of a self-service BI approach. Our business is still answering the questions that we're telling them to ask, and we're giving them the answers to those questions. We want them to be able to ask their own questions and react in a more real-time manner to their own data. And so before we can do that, we need access to the data, but we also need a better understanding of the data. What's the math that builds up those metrics and those KPIs? So we have a very intentional focus around understanding and glossaries and communication and training. We want to make that data actionable and visual through KPIs and indicators on all dashboards, and provide more visualization around the data as opposed to spreadsheets. If you're familiar with Anscombe's Quartet, that's a very key thing that we're focused on, is that that spreadsheet could tell you any number of things. So let's make it visual so we can really see where those outliers lie and react to it better. And we want to encourage data-driven decision-making. If someone asks a question and they're going to make a decision based on their gut, we want them to use data for that. An example of that historically was we have these subject matter expert agreements where we're not going to install hardware. There's not really a deliverable at the end of it. It's just a guy to go to a customer site and help them watch over their shoulder, right? Doesn't sound like it needs a lot of project management time, but every single project was getting 20% hours of project management time added to it. And we started seeing that we were over-scoping those, and we could tighten that budget a little bit and be a little more competitive in that area. And so somebody came along and just said, you know what, 5% sounds good. Let's go with 5%. We didn't use data for that. Luckily, it worked out. We were pretty close once we started analyzing that, but that was a decision that was based on gut. Quote that I love that I picked up last year at the conference is, without data, you're just another guy with an opinion. That's the key point to that strategy, and has become a mantra for our team. So really, how are we doing that? And that's the touchy-feely stuff. But the next step in this process then is getting closer to the data, getting closer to the business, and that brings us to quality. How do we put a focus on quality? And yes, this is an eye chart. I don't expect you to really read the whole thing. I'm going to highlight the two areas very quickly. On the left, in the darker shade, data integrity focus. This is more compliance type stuff. Those exceptions that we are able to create reports on. Where do we have incomplete information? When we create a project in the system, are people filling out all of the required fields? We have reports that tell us this, and we take that feedback back to the business. The next step of that is data exceptions. Does the data even make sense? If a project is scheduled to close in May, but it's now August, something's wrong if that project is still open. So we have reports tell us when project end dates are past due, because that end date drives our financial forecast. So there's a lot of value of why that end date is extremely important. So we have a lot of automated reports that we put out in the business for their visibility to see where those exceptions lie. And then once we have all of that good garbage in, garbage out stuff figured out, now we can put the human spin on that. And so that first column under business analytics around data quality is the stuff that really needs to pass the sniff test. Maybe something that's not truly able to be automated. So for projects, margin and gross profit starts going downhill, we want to identify that immediately and start the reconciliation process and the remediation process to stop the bleeding, if you will. And so that data quality piece is, we start seeing that number decrease, we need more information. We need to ask some questions. And I'll show you a dashboard in a minute that helps us do that. Then we move to issue management. All of those things, if that is legitimate and the gross profit really is tanking, then the PM needs to tell us that. So we have a risk management process, and we have some tools that allow us to document comments for every project and say, this realization, this project is going south for this reason. and we have escalation paths for those and provide visibility all the way up to executive level management for that information through reporting. That's all of our open, active projects so that we can stop that bleeding and maybe recover it and recover that customer's confidence too before the project closes. And then we close the project and we're in the lessons learned territory. We're in postmortems. We're going back and learning from our successes, learning from our failures. And we have intentional processes around this. Each region does a monthly postmortem review, and we take that information and roll it up to the overall professional services level and monthly management meetings for professional services. We're taking that feedback and providing it back to the business of a sample of those things that we learned in the previous month and those projects that have recently closed. And so we're intentionally staying on top of this in a routine manner so that we're providing visibility to this information as quickly as possible. Most importantly, it's intentional. So how are we doing that? Here's the dashboard that I mentioned earlier. Again, this is just a screenshot because it does have some proprietary information in it. But this is a project dashboard for one of our projects that are for our customers. You can see right off the bat financial reviews. We've got a schedule there for what employees are scheduled for this project and what does their timeline look like. We've got at the top, we would normally see milestones, and we could track how we're performing on those milestones if we've missed dates on things. Down in the lower left, also masked information, so that's why it looks blank, is where the project manager writes in those issues. So 99% realization, the target's 100. Why isn't it 100? I should see an issue down there from the project manager who's going to tell me why it's 99%. Now I don't have to go bug him because I have the scorecard right in front of me. We also have an overall scorecard. If that project dashboard is the lowest level of detail, this is our highest level of detail. This is our overall professional services scorecard that tells us at a high level of our business, how are we performing? And this ties to our goals for professional services. We have an operational excellence goal, partner goal, compliance goals, and high performance team goals. We break those down into KPIs and metrics from a financial perspective and from how are we focused on training with our employees, the survey to our sales teams, how do they view us, what's their perception of us. This scorecard also gets reviewed monthly in our management meetings. Our senior director takes this, learns some things from it, and then provides feedback back to the business to say, guys, this is where we need to improve. You're doing really, really well in this area, all of those types of things. But we also want to drive accountability down to the lowest levels of the organization. And so every single role has this exact same dashboard in their own context. And so I have a scorecard that allows me to look at, in my context, how can I affect these metrics and these goals? So we're driving consistency and accountability and rolling that all up so that each and every opportunity we have, I can look at how I can affect these overall goals. Complementary to the scorecard, we have dashboards for every role that is a little bit deeper dive into these numbers and provides a little more context around that. So each project manager, delivery manager, or director can manage their own business with their own dashboard. So it's a very intentional focus around data quality, around structure, and a lot of things that we're doing within professional services to make an impact in our business. And this visibility to the data really has allowed us to see some changes in behavior. At the beginning of this year, almost all of those green check marks and yellow exclamation points and things were red X's. But over the last several months, we've turned those into green check marks because we're providing visibility to it and reviewing it intentionally on a routine basis. And really, that's what we're doing within professional services. And in that key partnership with IT, they have taken this model and we're starting to roll this out to our other business units, and that's where I'll hand it off to Rob, and that's where he can tell the rest of our story.
Okay, so I'm Rob. I'm on the BICC here. Before coming to Worldwide, I was the business intelligence manager at another company where I made the decision to bring in Tableau, so I was already sold on the product. It did very well over there, so I was excited to see that it had a toehold already at Worldwide. I came on around the same time Lance was getting excited, or getting those executives excited about it. IT was already getting that message from above to move in this direction, so my goal was to convince the doubters in IT to embrace this as well. That we should make it the standard, roll it out company-wide. More importantly, I needed to spread the message that Tableau is just the beginning of this. This is about moving to a self-service BI model, which is a complete mind shift. An easy-to-use tool in the hands of the business is one piece of the puzzle, but how you organize yourselves in the business, in IT, and how you conduct the relationship between those two groups is even more important. So Lance already had the business side figured out, as he showed in that slide earlier. So we had to set the strategy for how we would structure ourselves in IT to better support him and build that relationship in order to make this model really a shining example that we could pitch to the other areas. On the IT side, we made our focus not on analyzing data, not on making reports, but on providing the data sources. The problem is the data was not in a very pretty state, as is so often the case. This is where you have some decisions to make. Do you quickly open up data in whatever ugly, messy form it's in and give that to the business? Or do you wait until you've made it perfect, until you've architected it and cleaned it as much as possible, and you have a nice data warehouse before you provide anyone any access to it?
I can answer that question. The answer is don't wait, because we can't wait to respond and react to our business.
Exactly. So what we decided to do, though, is because there are benefits in both sides of this, we decided to go ahead and do both. We took our own two-pronged approach to this. So we said, let's open up the floodgates. Let the business see whatever data they want, warts and all, but warn them about it, that there will be a lot of that garbage in, garbage out in their reporting. This way, IT is no longer a bottleneck at all. We're constantly delivering data, and they have at least something to start with, even if it's high risk to use that. So we put a couple people focused on that rapid data delivery path. And for the second path, we started an effort to get some more solid data sources in that data warehouse that will be better quality, easier to work with, that we could switch over to someday in the future. So these two complement each other. With our short-term solutions, we're learning what data matters most, what fields to focus our attention on. It allows us to work out a lot of the requirements and kinks ahead of that long-term solution. Most data problems aren't really discovered or fully understood until you shine a light on them. So by exposing the short-term data in Tableau, we were able to find the problems. So the cleanup effort happens prior to that long-term release. Many of the issues are business process related anyway, so Lance's team are working those while IT is cleaning up what it can. So now that we had IT structured in a way that worked, it was important for us to have a very strong relationship with PS.
So Rob and I started dating.
We wanted absolutely none of the finger pointing, the stiff arming you heard about earlier, or any of the general frustration you so often find between business and IT. This is absolutely critical for successful self-service BI to work. And it starts with having a shared vision. These sides have to be in agreement and in sync on how this needs to work. Luckily, in our situation, Lance and I were pretty much on the same page from day one, but if you are not, this has to be addressed as your first priority. Next is how you organize the process, the interaction between these groups. So we started with our buddy system here, a dedicated analytics leader in the business paired up with a lead analyst in IT, working closely and in constant communication around data needs, with an agile process to deliver on those needs iteratively on both those short and long-term tracks. So Lance is the product owner for us, for our IT Scrum team. He's the one making decisions on what data is needed, prioritizing these, reviewing what IT provides to make sure it's right. Going back and asking for specific changes is a ton of just back and forth. So we work together literally every day, no barriers in communication. And this diagram isn't to say that all communication is funneled between Lance and myself. Part of our role is to encourage direct communication between the members of the teams as well. So having these defined roles and defined process like this in place really helps you to make this effective and sustainable. In other areas, there wasn't that clarity on who coordinates the work on either side, so you had a lot of disjointed and overlapping efforts with no defined analytics team in the business. Mountains of report requests were just getting entered into a tool and getting electronically sent over the wall. into some queue in IT where it became up to someone in IT to sort through that, prioritize it, assign the work out. And when people eventually got their report back, if they got it back, that turned into a spreadsheet which would get combined with other data they had and analyzed for the real report, just like how Lance was describing earlier in his process before Tableau came into place. So the whole process had very little communication, took way too much time, and there was generally just a lot of dissatisfaction. But people quickly began to take notice of what was going on in PS. So this model we developed was becoming a success, and we started talking about how we could replicate it out to the other verticals. The BICC was formed to lead this effort. And our focus became to build these analytics teams out in the business, organizing them just like Lance's team. And at the same time, build the IT side out with its complementary model. We would have that buddy system for each vertical and apply that Scrum process within each group. We obtained high-level executive sponsorship for this, which is key to making any big organizational changes like this, especially when we're talking about making changes across both the business and in IT. We also began an education campaign to garner ground-level support from within each vertical for this new model. So we filled the BICC roles first and set out to find the analytics leads, and I stress the word lead, as the person needs to have strong leadership qualities. They're going to be right in the center of things, coordinating work, presenting findings, organizing priorities across a lot of different stakeholders. They're also the primary liaison with IT. They are the product owner in the Scrum process. The next, we work with these leaders to identify, organize, train all the data analysts in the business. And that takes us to the Tableau rollout. So the first challenge of the BICC was to define and begin building the new organizational structure and process, but the next was to get the best tools in the hands of these data analysts. So that meant launching Tableau. These two things were happening basically simultaneously. We decided to get the core server license. We have a couple of thousand people at Worldwide, so we knew there'd be enough of them consuming reports almost right out of the gate, so it just didn't make any financial sense to do the name server licenses. We also bought 20 desktop licenses and ended up buying 20 more every 4 months or so. So as I mentioned, we had that education campaign to build a ground level support for our model, but part of that campaign was just exposing Tableau to people in the business. And it went down very similarly to the way Lance described with our president. People got very excited when they saw it. Think of this as selling them on Tableau in a way, because that's really what you have to do. You have to put it in front of people so they can see it for themselves and see how easy it is and start thinking of all the possibilities that you can do with it. And I'm sure our account managers will no doubt appreciate us doing the selling for them, but that gets their excitement way up, all these people in the business. And suddenly the analytical empire that you're trying to build becomes a little bit more palatable and begins to make more sense to people. As we're demoing Tableau inside the business, we learned who is doing the data analysis right now, who's making the Excel pivot tables, and targeted these people for potential Tableau licenses or even potential members of these new analytics teams. For those that seemed like good candidates, which is about 2/3 of those that we demoed it to, I gave them a 3-hour intro training on desktop. And of those who got the training, those that seemed like they were actually going to use it, got a license. And now that this movement has been snowballing, we make people provide a justification on their plans with Tableau in order to get a license, so we don't have people sitting on unused licenses anywhere. I'd caution against this at first. You don't want to put any constraints on potential adoption right out of the gate. So as we are building out this new organization, the BICC also had to start thinking about things like portfolio management and resource allocation across this whole thing. The business will be driving what everyone works on within each team using that Scrum process, but how do we decide the ratios of how many people belong in each team? There's just a million possible analytical projects to focus on, and each can require a great deal of work spanning both IT and the business. And as this diagram illustrates, you're mining data from the source systems, organizing it, analyzing it, and presenting the findings. Just multiply that by however many possible projects you have, and you can see that your resources, even if you're expanding them, can really still be pretty constrained here. So to answer what you have to do there, what are the projects that matter most? Those that matter most are those that are in support of the business goals that matter most. Okay, so what are the business goals that matter most? That's where you really need to start. And once you have a sense of the top business goals, you can map projects to those and map people to those projects. So in addition to building out the organization, rolling out Tableau, the third goal the BICC focused on during its basically a grand tour across the business was strategic alignment, which started with mapping those goals. So we conducted a series of meetings with business leaders to learn the strategy, organize it, get it on paper. We used Kaplan and Norton's strategy map framework. Anyone who's familiar with balanced scorecard stuff, that's the framework we used for this. With the one-page document of all our top goals, it literally forces people across the business to get on the same page in terms of what are the company's top goals. That process completed relatively recently, so now we know what we should focus on at a high level. We're now beginning to use this to help us make those resource hiring and placement decisions. So going back to the teams, they're organized by department here. There's a huge risk of things becoming very siloed when we structure things like this. That strategy mapping process also helps us to think beyond departmental goals and determine what goals span across the company. So going forward, this core group in the middle here are the BICC and the analytical leads will own this process, refreshing the map every year. But more importantly, this group will be meeting regularly to share what we're doing and coordinate and prioritize the work across the teams. The most important thing for any BI initiative is making sure you're aligned with the business, supporting the goals that matter most. That's why we've been taking this action both at the team level across here and then across the whole BI analytics organization vertically here to improve that alignment. This new self-service BI model had its detractors, and that all comes down to control. IT would no longer be able to control all the reporting. There was a fear of anarchy, really. Our response is IT only had the illusion of control anyway. Lance described how reports were developed in PS prior to this new model. The thousands of hours of BI-related work was basically already happening outside IT. So we're talking about shadow systems here, Excel hell that IT had zero visibility into. I would describe this scenario not as self-service BI, but as no-service BI, where the business is attempting to manage all these data sources on their own, spending the majority of their time attempting to integrate it all themselves. People will always find a way to do what they need to do with or without IT, so bringing this new model in actually helped rein in some of that chaos. With Excel sheets now being used as data sources in Tableau, with a list of them right there in Tableau Server, IT has clear visibility into these shadow systems and could work to move them to databases. Finance had the same sort of fears, losing control. They feared these new groups would do their own data analysis. There'd be two versions of the numbers out there, and they'd be hammered with all sorts of questions. And they were right. That's exactly what happened. Their immediate reaction was to start locking down those sources of data so other groups wouldn't have any access to them. They wanted to be the sole reporting group around financial numbers. And our feeling was these number mismatches were actually a good thing, though. It started a conversation. Why are they different? What are these teams doing differently? It sparked conversations, forced us to investigate these problems, and then ultimately discover what was the cause behind it. Whether it originated in IT, PS, or in finance, and depending on the situation, it could be any of those three. Everyone became educated in each other's process. It brought us to work closer together, and as a result, we built a close partnership with finance, and they slowly began buying into this vision as well. Now, they're using Tableau, and we're sharing the same data sources across all these departments. So with the executives, the leaders inside the verticals, and the detractors all on board, over the course of the year, we've been seeing this vision come to life. There's still a long road ahead, but already the analytical maturity of Worldwide has improved, and the culture has become more data-driven.
And so to recap, and going back to the timeline maybe, is you can see the progression of the story as we talk through how it began in professional services and then had the executive backing and grew as that partnership built between IT and PS to now that partnership can expand through the Business Intelligence Competency Center out to those other vertical business units within the company. And sure, we're going to have some mishaps and some setbacks along the way, like the finance, locking down access to data, and some of that data integrity from multiple data sources coming into question. But it really becomes a motivator for our team to provide visibility to those problems, like Rob said, to then encourage that behavior and encourage more data-driven decisions to give us more visibility, so we have more data in front of us that we can learn from and we can build on that strong foundation. So back to the review a little bit, kind of 4 areas of things that we hope the story really exposed for you about the intentional areas of focus for us here at Worldwide. Was in the organization. It began really with executive support. Without that executive support, there's no way we could have built what we've built and are continuing to build, which is a cross-functional team with defined roles embedded in each of the business units. That is a key element to this, that IT doesn't own it all, and each of the business units have a say in the roadmap and the plan and the metrics that we're measuring as an overall business. The process, agile development. If you're not familiar with Scrum methodologies and agile software development methodologies, it works for BI too. It's interesting to point out here that as much trouble as I like to give IT, they passed us. A few months ago, based on their agile methodologies and how rapidly they were sending data our way, we weren't able to keep up with the data sources they were giving us for us to validate those data sources and pull them into other reports. And so that agile development works to speed up this process. It takes local leadership in driving that process within each business unit. And most importantly, in my mind, is focused analytics. We have people focused on the 10,000-foot view of the business, which then turns into the culture side of it, providing visibility to every single person in the business, whether it's finance and IT who want more control over things, to an individual business user, individual contributor out in the business, having visibility to, that doesn't feel right, what can I do to change it? So that changes business behavior, which is a huge cultural impact thing, which then drives increased demand for the data because we have more trust in the data now based on that culture. And I think trust is a really key thing there to keep this vision going forward. Because based on that trust, now we can provide better value. Through the visibility, we have better quality. We have more real-time results because IT is working behind the scenes to provide us that access that is has coverage of all the data points that we need to see, and the systems are, we're no longer waiting for monthly reports to come out or weekly reports to come out. We're getting it directly out of the source systems themselves. So now that we have comprehensive data, we can have comprehensive analysis and a view across the entire business, not only just professional services, but we can integrate that with supply chain, logistics, sales, pipelines, all of the above to really change the culture of Worldwide into being more data-driven. Any questions?